Welcome and hello to you. I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine stepping off a commercial flight today. You know, you check your smartphone and you realize you have literally traveled 8 years into the past.
Right, which, that sounds like the plot of a science fiction movie.
It really does. But if you land in Ethiopia today, that is your actual reality. You are stepping into a world that operates on just a completely different timeline. And that is exactly what we are exploring today.
Yeah, and it's such a massive topic.
It is. Usually, when we try to learn about a new part of the world, we rely on these, I guess I'd call them flattened, two-dimensional postcards.
Oh, for sure, like a picture of a steaming cup of dark coffee, or maybe a cross carved into some dusty red rock.
Exactly. And we see that and we think, I have a gist of the place.
Which is really just the highlight reel approach to geography. It gives us a geographic marker, but it completely strips away all the texture, It removes the context of how people actually live their day-to-day lives.
Absolutely. So today, our mission is to basically tear up that standard travel postcard. We are diving deep into the rich, complex, and honestly just deeply rooted culture of Ethiopia.
And we should probably let the listener know right up front, we aren't just going to list off tourist destinations like some audio guidebook.
Oh, definitely not. We are going to figure out how to truly engage with a country that boasts over 80 distinct ethnic groups, 13 months of sunshine, and a history that literally stretches back to the cradle of humankind.
It is a huge undertaking, which is exactly why the sources we're synthesizing for this deep dive are just so diverse.
Yeah, we've got a lot to cover.
We really do. We're pulling from strict cultural etiquette guides, an extensive essay from the Metropolitan Museum of Art on ancient rock-hewn architecture, a deep exploration into the origins of coffee, and this is a big one, a very nuanced look at the modern realities of tribal tourism in the South.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can even begin to comprehend the grand monuments or those massive religious festivals of the Ethiopian highlands, we have to start with the daily rhythm of its people.
Right, the absolute foundation.
Yeah, and that rhythm begins with the single most fundamental act of Ethiopian hospitality, which is the coffee ceremony.
And we really have to emphasize the word ceremony here, because this is not just a quick beverage to, jumpstart your morning commute.
Not at all.
Ethiopia, specifically the southwestern Kaffa region, which, fun fact, is actually where the word coffee comes from, is the undisputed birthplace of the Arabica bean. It's been growing wild in those highland forests for thousands of years.
The relationship they have with this plant is just profound. I was looking through our sources, and there's this Ethiopian proverb, Budo Dabo Na.
Ah, yeah. Coffee is our bread.
Exactly. It translates to, coffee is our bread. It's not viewed as a luxury. It is physical and spiritual nourishment. In fact, ancient travelers in the region didn't even drink it at first.
Wait, really? They didn't drink it?
No. They used to take crushed raw coffee beans and mix them with animal fat or thick cream to make these dense little balls of sustenance for long journeys.
Wow. It is brilliant when you think about the mechanics of that. You are combining a high-fat calorie source with a powerful stimulant.
Basically, the original energy bar.
Exactly. Designed to keep nomadic travelers alert and fed over grueling terrain. But as society evolved, the consumption of coffee transformed into this incredibly intricate social ritual. Today, this ceremony happens not just once, but usually 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night.
And a single ceremony takes 2 to 3 hours to complete.
Yeah, it's a massive commitment of time.
That time commitment is what really stopped me in my tracks. I want you, the listener, to just imagine this for a second. Think about your morning drive-through coffee.
Oh man, the stress.
Right, you're alone in your car, you're tapping your steering wheel, anxious because the line is moving too slow. You're just grabbing a paper cup through a window to inject caffeine into your bloodstream so you can rush off to be productive.
It's purely functional.
Completely. Now, compare that to the Ethiopian ceremony. It's hosted by the women of the household. They start by physically transforming the space. They spread fresh grass and flowers on the floor to invite nature inside.
Mm-hmm. And they burn frankincense.
Yes. The hostess takes raw green coffee beans and roasts them by hand in a cast iron pot over an open flame right in front of her guests.
She controls the entire sensory environment of the room. And then, once the beans are roasted and that aroma fills the space, she crushes them by hand using a wooden mortar and pestle.
Just incredible.
Then she brews the coffee 3 separate times in a traditional round-bottomed clay pot called a jabena.
So my question is, what does that do to a society's mindset? when you are like culturally obligated to stop, sit down, and converse with your family and neighbors for hours every single day.
What's fascinating here is how this ritual acts as a primary stabilizing force for the community. Well, in Western cultures, we mostly use caffeine to isolate ourselves and maximize our individual output. But in Ethiopia, the slow, deliberate nature of the ceremony is entirely the point. It's a daily meditation.
Oh, I love that way of framing it.
Think about the mechanics of a neighborhood dispute, right? It is incredibly difficult to stay furiously angry at someone when you are both forced to sit in a room together.
Right, smelling roasting frankincense and just waiting.
Exactly, waiting hours for a hostess to hand grind and brew your drink. The sheer length of the ceremony naturally de-escalates tension. It forces proximity and provides an open forum to discuss life, resolve arguments, and share warmth.
And there are strict rules for participating, as we learn from the etiquette guides. As a guest, you never rush the ceremony.
Oh, absolutely not.
Showing impatience is considered highly disrespectful. And when it comes to the broader etiquette of eating and drinking in Ethiopia, there's a very specific physical rule. You only ever use your right hand for giving, receiving, and eating.
Yes, because traditionally, the left hand was reserved for personal hygiene. So culturally, using it for food or for handing an item to someone is considered deeply impolite.
That makes sense.
You use the right hand, and this physical rule extends to a really beautiful, intimate dining tradition called gursha.
I found the concept of gursha so moving. Meals in Ethiopia are usually shared from a massive communal plate. You have a large, spongy flatbread called Injera, and it's topped with various rich stews.
Which are amazing, by the way.
Oh, they look incredible. But gursha is the act of picking up a morsel of that food with your right hand and placing it directly into the mouth of someone else at the table.
It is a gesture of profound respect and affection. And the etiquette guide is uncompromising on this point. If someone offers you gursha, you do not abruptly refuse it.
Even if you're full.
Even if you are completely full, you accept it graciously. Because to reject the food is to literally reject the social bond being offered to you.
Wow. That level of intentional, intimate devotion isn't just reserved for the living room or the dining table, though.
No, it scales up in a massive way.
It really does. Because if you travel up into the northern highlands, you'll find that same obsessive dedication literally carved into the earth. We're talking about the monolithic, rock-hewn churches of Lalibela.
This site represents one of the most astonishing architectural achievements in human history. We're looking at a complex of 11 churches located roughly 2,630 meters.
Which is over 8,600 feet for us Americans.
Right, way above sea level.
I was reading the museum essay on Lalibela, and the timeline it gives was honestly breaking my brain. Tradition tells us that King Lalibela built these churches sometime between the 7th and 13th centuries.
The story goes that he wanted to create a new Jerusalem after the actual city of Jerusalem fell.
Right, but the text says he carved all 11 of these massive structures in just 24 years, working alongside a team of angels. Wait, hold on, I have to push back on that timeline.
I figured you might.
24 years. To excavate 11 massive monolithic churches out of solid volcanic rock by hand, that seems practically impossible without modern machinery. I mean, how is that even mathematically feasible?
When you look at the sheer scale of the project, you absolutely understand why they had to invoke the help of angels to explain it to subsequent generations. Because these churches were not built by stacking stones from the ground up.
They were dug out.
They were excavated. They were carved directly out of the porous, volcanic, basaltic rock of the mountainside. Now, basalt is slightly softer when it's first exposed to the air, which helps the carvers, but it hardens over time.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. They were carved top down. They didn't build walls.
No, not at all.
The workers stood on the flat, solid rock surface, traced the outline of the roof, and then used hand chisels and axes to dig straight down into the earth, hollowing out the interior and the exterior courtyards simultaneously.
It's mind-boggling.
Without modern lasers or computer modeling, imagine the mathematical perfection required. Because if you make one wrong swing of an axe while you're carving a vaulted ceiling...
You can't just patch it with a new piece of stone.
Exactly. The entire monolithic structure is compromised.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this isn't construction in any traditional sense. It is the absolute mastery of negative space. You are sculpting a massive void out of the earth.
And just getting the rubble out.
Oh, the logistics of simply removing the debris are staggering. Every ton of rock they chiseled away had to be hauled up and out of these deep pits by human hands. Furthermore, because these structures are sunken deep into the ground, the builders had to design incredibly complex hydraulic drainage trenches.
Yeah, I was looking at photos of these trenches, and they seem incredibly deep just for rain drainage. Was there, another reason they dug them so far down?
They serve a brilliant dual purpose. Practically, they channel the torrential rains of the wet season away so the sunken churches don't fill up like swimming pools.
Which is important.
Very important. But spiritually, they act as a profound physical journey for the pilgrims. The narrow pathways linking the churches force visitors to walk single file.
Oh, wow.
You literally have to descend deep into the earth, moving through dark, claustrophobic tunnels alongside your fellow worshipers before ascending back up into the grand sacred space of the church courtyard. It is a highly engineered symbolic journey of descending into the grave in order to ascend to heaven.
And visually, they didn't just leave them as plain rock boxes either. King Lalabella's dynasty, the Zagwe dynasty, was making a major political statement here.
Yes, the architectural choices were very deliberate.
The sources mention they carved stelliform windows to mimic the ancient Aksumite Empire. And just to clarify that for you, the listener, the Aksumite Empire was this massive, powerful civilization that ruled the region centuries earlier.
They were a huge deal.
Yeah, and they were famous for erecting these towering stone pillars or steels. So the Zagwe kings deliberately carved their windows and structural beams to mimic that ancient style. It's essentially the equivalent of a modern government building Greek columns into a new courthouse to borrow the authority of ancient Rome.
That is exactly the visual psychology at play. They were legitimizing their rule in stone. And inside a church like Beit Mariam, the devotion continues. You find vivid, brightly colored biblical frescoes and intricate geometric paintings applied directly to the carved stone walls and ceilings.
But Lalibela is not just a dusty archaeological site, though. It's not a museum where you go to look at dead history behind glass.
No, it's very much alive.
It is a living, breathing epicenter of faith for millions of Ethiopian Orthodox Christians. And the rhythm of that faith is governed by a calendar that completely flips our perspective on time.
Yes, Ethiopia follows a version of the Julian calendar, which is quite different from the Gregorian calendar used by most of the world.
Let's go back to that idea of stepping off the plane. If you are listening to this in 2024, when you land in Ethiopia, the current year is roughly 2016.
Such a trip to think about.
To put that in perspective, in their calendar, the global events of the late 2010s haven't even happened yet.
The math behind it comes down to different historical calculations regarding the Annunciation and the birth year of Jesus. Because of this, the Ethiopian calendar is about 7 to 8 years behind.
And the months are different too, right?
Yeah, it consists of 12 months, each exactly 30 days long, followed by a short 13th month called Pagun. That one has 5 or 6 days depending on leap years. This unique structure is why the country famously promoted itself as having 13 months of sunshine.
And that unique calendar dictates a cycle of spectacular, massive festivals. Let's look at Jena, the Ethiopian Christmas, which falls on January 7th in our calendar.
Right. Jena comes at the end of 40 days of intense fasting. For over a month, observant Orthodox Christians consume no meat, no eggs, and no dairy.
That is strict.
Very. On the eve of the holiday, millions of people, many draped in traditional, elegant white gowns called natellas, gather in places like Lalibela for all-night vigils. When the sun comes up, the fast is broken, usually with a communal feast featuring Doro Wote, a rich, heavily spiced chicken stew.
And then they play sports, which I found amazing. According to local tradition, the shepherds who heard about the birth of Jesus expressed their joy by playing a game that is basically a rough version of field hockey.
Yeah, called Yejina Chawara.
Exactly. You can still find people in the rural countryside playing it today with curved wooden sticks.
Then, just over a week later, on January 19th, the country celebrates Timkat, or Epiphany. Our sources describe this as the most colorful and expansive festival of the year.
The scale of Timkat is just difficult to wrap your head around. Every Orthodox church houses a tablet, which is a highly sacred replica of the Ark of the Covenant.
Right, and normally they are hidden away.
Right. But during Timkat, these tablets are taken out of the churches, wrapped in luxurious ornamental cloth so they aren't viewed directly by the public, and paraded through the streets to a body of water.
Priests hold a vigil over the tablets through the night, accompanied by thousands of worshipers singing, dancing, and blowing traditional trumpets.
It sounds incredible.
The next day, the water is blessed and splashed over the massive crowds to renew their baptismal vows. In the historical city of Gondar, this takes place at Fasilides Bath, which is this massive 17th century sunken pool that is filled with river water specifically for this one occasion.
And we can't skip over Meskel in late September, celebrating the finding of the True Cross. In the capital city of Addis Ababa, hundreds of thousands of people pack into Meskel Square to witness the lighting of the Demera.
A giant bonfire.
Yeah, a towering, conical bonfire. People sing, dance, and eventually jump over the smoldering ashes. And even outside of strict religious context, the culture gathers in these massive numbers, like for the Great Ethiopian Run in November, which draws over 44,000 runners to the streets of the capital.
When you synthesize all of this, from the intimate act of hand-feeding someone gursha at a small dinner table, to millions of people sharing a single unified vigil at Timkat, you see a very clear cultural through line.
What's that?
The community is consistently elevated above the individual. Every celebration, every meal, and every architectural pathway is deliberately designed to be experienced collectively.
It is a deeply beautiful way to structure a society. But as we move from the unified Orthodox highlands of the north down into the deep south of the country, that collective unity shifts.
It's a completely different world down there.
It really is. We enter a vastly different, highly fractured, and incredibly complex reality. We have to talk about the Lower Omo Valley.
The Lower Omo Valley is arguably one of the most fascinating regions on the African continent. This area is home to over 130,000 people, divided across about 12 distinct pastoralist tribes.
And just to define that term for a second, these are historically nomadic or semi-nomadic communities. Their entire way of life relies on herding livestock and moving with the seasons for grazing and water.
Exactly. And the genetic and linguistic diversity packed into this one valley is among the highest on Earth.
The visual traditions of these tribes are incredibly striking. Even if you don't know the names of the tribes, you've probably seen their photographs in travel magazines.
Oh, almost certainly.
You have the Mercy women, renowned for wearing heavy clay plates in their lower lips. You have the Hamer tribe, where individuals roll their hair into tight ringlets using a mixture of butter and red ochre.
The Karo boys paint intricate geometric patterns on their faces and bodies using white ash.
Right, and the Bodhi men hold specific ceremonies where they consume a mixture of blood and milk to compete for who has the largest, fattest stomach, which is a symbol of wealth and prosperity.
However, these ancient ways of life are currently facing severe existential threats. Primarily, the natural environment they have relied on for centuries is changing rapidly.
Yeah, the dam project.
Yes, the construction of the massive Gaib Third Dam upstream on the Omo River has fundamentally altered the ecosystem. The dam holds back the river's seasonal surge, which stops the natural biannual floods.
And they need those floods.
Desperately. For generations, these tribes relied on those specific floods to deposit nutrient-rich silt over the riverbanks so they could practice flood retreat agriculture. Without that silt, and compounded by severe ongoing droughts, their food security is just vanishing.
And running parallel to that environmental crisis, you have a sudden, massive explosion of international tourism. And this is where the situation gets really sticky.
It's highly controversial.
Many seasoned travelers and sociologists have heavily criticized certain tours in the Omo Valley, describing them as human zoos. Tourists drive up in air-conditioned 4x4s, jump out, point giant camera lenses in people's faces, hand over a few Ethiopian birr per photo, and then drive away without ever learning a single person's name.
This raises an important question, though. What is the actual on-the-ground impact of this global attention? Because it is crucial that we look at this impartially.
Right.
On one hand, the influx of tourist money creates a highly commodified environment. Sacred, seasonal rituals are sometimes staged on demand, completely out of season, simply because a tour group just arrived and is willing to pay to see it.
Which feels so inauthentic.
It does. Furthermore, there are well-documented reports of tribespeople altering their traditional adornments, making their lip plates larger or their body paint more extreme, purely because they know it looks more striking on a foreigner's camera, which earns them more money.